So I had um just overcome having COVID, and I had COVID for like 70 days. And it was like for like 60 days that I was like super sick, but like it was like about a 10-day span of time where I was like in this weird like in between being sick, not being sick type thing. And so it was like really affected by it for dude, straight up 70 days. And like I tried to talk about it on the internet a couple times, but people were like, you're stupid and stuff, which was generally like the response that I got no matter where I commented anywhere on the internet. And it was because people had my accounts hacked and all that stuff, and they had my phone mirrored, so they could like see everything that I was doing, and also like they were like watching me a lot closer than they, you know, wanted to let on. So they could see stuff like that I was doing, like anything that had to do with like branching out and saying anything, sharing any ideas, or speaking to large groups or anything like that. And they would make sure that they would catch any kind of attempts like that I would make. And, they'd make sure that all the replies that I got were like really negative. That was supposed to be like a form of like energy harvesting, but also it was like a way to like keep somebody who's like in a slavery type situation, kind of like be quiet about it. But to cut through like a whole bunch of stuff, I ended up finding what I thought was a severed finger. I even showed what I thought could be a severed finger to people, and they're like, ugh, you know? And I really wanted them to tell me that what I was looking at was not a severed finger, but no one could actually tell me that what I was looking at wasn't a severed finger. So, like, I showed a few people beforehand, but there was like, I kind of wanted to get other people's opinions or whatever, and I kind of wanted to turn it into the police type people's, even if it wasn't that, you know what I mean? Then there was like a few other things that I was interested in, like handing over that might have been linked to child abuse type stuff that I was uncertain of, and that I was worried people weren't being straight with me over. And at the same time frame that this was going on, that was whenever I started to try to use cameras to catch other people in the act, because I was suspicious of weird shit going on. And they were doing shit to fuck with my cameras, and to fuck with the recordings that I would make every night. So, like, I tried to go to the police station, but they seemed to be like ignoring me or avoiding me or whatever. And I kind of wanted to go home already. It was already like 11 o'clock or something like that. And so I ended up stopping at the Go Mart over in the center of Elkins, West Virginia. And I really just wanted to take my kid and go home and go to bed and stuff. But I really wanted to like hand this thing over and like be done with that part of what I was trying to do, at least. Because I'd gone out of my way to like leave Beverly and drive to Elkins, which isn't that far, but it's also late and stuff. And I kind of had my kid with me, and I kind of like come up with and gathered up the balls to show up and turn this thing in, or show up and turn these things in, and you know what I mean, make whatever, say whatever I need to, and then go home and stuff. And sure, it's late, but a person should be able to show up even at like the weird fucking hours or whatever, especially if they're like worried about kids or whatever. And because I had just recovered from COVID, um, and if you can remember back then, like it was when everybody first broke out with the COVID stuff, and like everything shut down and shit, and like lots of people fucking had COVID, and people weren't going to school anymore, and everybody's like days and nights got mixed up. Um, as far as the people who were reliant on a like school year to, you know what I mean, school and work and that sort of those hours, like people who lived by those schedules suddenly didn't have to anymore. So uh it was 11 o'clock at night, and you know what I mean, I was running around kind of ready to get help on this subject. So I was like sitting out in front of this Go-Mart and I was like, geez, I wish that I could just hurry up and get this over with. You know what I mean? Since people aren't going to like answer the door for me back at the station or whatever. And so I walk in there and I was like, hey, I have something like really weird that I brought with me, but it might be a little bit disturbing. And I'm not trying to traumatize anybody, but I kind of need people's opinion on this. And, uh, not trying to freak anybody out, but I'll be outside if you guys want to see what this is or whatever. And, I invited, the clerk, everybody in there, you know what I mean? Kind of was like loud and like, hey, there's kind of this thing. And I kind of need a second opinion about it because I don't really know what to do, kind of thing. And so whenever they all came outside, because I didn't want to like just represent the thing and not represent a story behind it, I basically let them all know that I was a very kept person in a very isolated situation, and that it was very difficult for me to just leave whenever I wanted to. That I sometimes had to even make excuses to the people around me to be going and doing things, unfortunately. It wasn't always like that. It had just gotten to that point that things were weird, and then I had gotten really suspicious, and I'd started to kind of like look around my house for any kind of evidence that might help me at all, and that I thought that I'd found a fucking severed finger, which was a quite bizarre discovery, to say the least, and that I'd placed this, object in a bag, and that I had it with me, and that I was really like, I needed for other people to either tell me that like that wasn't really what it was, or that what was what it was, and tell me whether or not I should turn the thing in, because I'm kind of like a crazy Gemini, and that I um, can sometimes be very like, at the time I just had this problem with avoidance, and it was very easy for me to just like avoid and ignore something, especially if it was small, like or something that wasn't nagging at me or whatever. And I didn't want to just pass up this thing if it was like somebody's fucking finger. And really at the house it was like there was kind of a lot of stuff going on, and like my boyfriend at the time, his kid had just gotten in trouble in school because the kid tried to say that like that he and some other kids were being held out in some like special place in the country where they were forced to fight against each other like gladiators. And then also I'd kind of understood that my own life stemmed from some kind of weird child trafficking issues, and that I had constantly been afraid that my kids were in trouble, which was why I was setting up those cameras and stuff like that. So that now all of a sudden I'm like set up with this fucking finger that almost looks like a fucking kid's finger, to be honest with you. And to describe it to you, like it looked almost like a finger, but it was like not the same color as this, and then you could see like a bone protruding out of it, and you could see like what looked like this part of your knuckle, on the outside of your knuckle. It's like they call that I guess they call it like a knuckle pad, but like I don't know what that is called for us, because it's kind of patty, but it's not. Anyways, you could see that thing on it. And it definitely wasn't like a part of a chicken or some other animal or whatever. It was very like human-ish looking flesh stuff, fingery. Like these people, they took the bag and they like passed it around each other, and they were like looking at it and shit like that. And they were like, yeah, dude, this does look like a motherfucking severed finger. And one of the dudes was even like, this looks like it could be a fucking severed child's finger. And this is what complete fucking strangers were telling me at Go-Mart. They were all weirded out and shit. And I was like, do you guys think I should turn this in, right? And they were like, yeah, you should definitely be turning that into the law and stuff. And I was like, all right, is there any way one of you guys could get a hold of them so that maybe they could meet me in this parking lot here? And they were like, and they just kind of like all walked off and stuff. And I thought for sure that like, it was a big enough deal that the clerk was going in and that she was going to like notify law enforcement or something. But like I guess that she didn't, and I sat there in that parking lot for like an hour, waiting for them to show up, maybe even longer than that, like expecting for them to show up and stuff, and like nothing happened. It was like uh, just completely dead. And so now I've been sitting out here and it's like, you know what I mean? Like after midnight or something like that. I'm like, geez, they've really got, they really had me. I don't know if she called or not, but I thought that she did. And I kind of sat out there for a long time. Like me and my kid ate a little bit more munchy stuff. I was just trying to keep him awake for a little bit longer, waiting for these, guys to show up or whatever. And they never did. And, I guess that they were getting ready to set me up in a totally different way. Um, and well, because nobody showed up then, and so what I did was like I went to back to the first police station where nobody was answering me to begin with, um, and I ended up talking to this officer. Actually, did finally walk out, and it was this cop named Officer Boatwright, Officer Christopher Boatwright, who ends up being one of the really bad guys in my situation. I showed Officer Boatwright the thing in the bag, and he knew that I was parked across the street and that my kid was asleep in the back of the car. And he saw the severed finger in the bag, and he made me wait. And I probably waited around him for probably 20 or 30 minutes. And his little deputy guy, Sayer, came out, and they were texting each other back and forth, and they were searching my name and all this stuff. And then he tells me that Beverly isn't in his. Whenever they check my name and everything, and they act like everything's fine, which is what happens which is what has happened before now. Like before this moment, every time anybody ran my name under any circumstances, they were like, "All right, she's fine" or whatever. So he keeps me there forever, it seems like, and then he's like, "I'm gonna call these other guys and tell them that you're in town or whatever." He's like, "Beverly's not in my jurisdiction." And he tells me to go ahead and get back in the car and to drive over to this other place. And like I said, he knows that I've got the kid in the back of the car and everything. Tells me to drive over to the other police station. Well, I drive over to the other police station and I'm knocking on the back door and I'm calling and I'm waiting and they're not answering the door and they're not answering the phone and they've got like all these cars on with the lights running and the cameras going and stuff like that, like 6 of them in the parking lot, but nobody's answering the door, nobody's out there, nobody will. This is like the second time that I've been there, the second time that I've done this, and by this time, like, it's probably around 1 o'clock or after. Like, they've like kept me waiting so long and so many of these different places as I'm trying to turn in what could be the only piece of someone that's left, you know and I'm not exactly a fucking angel or anything like that, but here I am with what could be somebody's fucking kid's severed finger, and I'm trying to fucking turn it into law enforcement. And I've never seen anyone go through this much trouble to try to even speak to law enforcement. It's really bizarre. And I know that the place where I just left from is like going to be dangerous for me to just go back to because I was just assaulted there. That's part of the reason why I showed up to the police too. Like, I just woke up in somebody else's clothes. There's pictures on my phone of me that I didn't take in weird situations. There's weird stuff going on. I need to talk to fucking cops. It was really that bad. It had gotten bad enough. Like, some really bad things were going on. I found a fucking severed finger. I thought my kids were getting messed with. I was having to set up cameras. Everybody was messing with the cameras. Well, so I'm like, oh God, I can't just go back because people had already showed people back in around the ghetto the severed finger in the bag, and I told them that I was going to the police. So now I can't just go back because I'll be attacked again for saying I'll be attacked even worse. It'll be like even worse than it already was just because I was trying to get help. And so I was like, fuck, I can't go back without at least trying to fucking get this help. You know what I mean? And that's why I fucking waited as long as I did. Well, here I was like, standing in front of this door, and as I'm knocking, I'm like, oh, these cops are, I was like, oh, these cops are doing this deliberately. And I turn and look behind me, and like off in the distance is this Officer Boatwright dude. And he's like in this car hovering, like in the darkness, like just sitting there hovering, watching me with his lights on. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, that is that fucking bad cop that I heard about that is supposed to be a dope dealer around here and is potentially involved in the MDKs of women and prostitutes and all different kinds of stuff around here. It has to do with insulin poisonings and weird stuff. And like also I've heard about that cop showing up places with like briefcases, like trading out money for stuff, stealing dope out of people's trunks of cars and all kinds of stuff. And I tell him, I was like, dude, I've already heard, you know what I mean? I told him even back at the other place, I was like, look, I've heard all about you. I was like, I'd treat people how I, you know what I mean, with the same respect that I'm treated, you know, with which I'm treated. So I hope that I don't have any problems with you, dude. And he did not like being told that. Okay, now I start to get really, really freaked out because this cop is sitting there staring at me, and he's staring at me from like Guy Street or Gay Street or whatever it's called over by the fucking police station. And like all of a sudden that these two other cops come out of the station, right? And he's like then he begins to drive up. Well, I tell these cops, I was like, Officer Boatwright said that he was going to call you guys and tell y'all that I was waiting out here. Did he call you and tell you that I was waiting out here? And they were like, no. And they acted like they weren't expecting me. They acted like they didn't know that I was going to be out there. Well, then Officer Boatwright pulls up, and a couple other cops have walked out. Well, he jumps out of his car, and like I'm basically showing them this thing that I have, because it's like I gotta, you know, go ahead and fucking, you know, like I'm not really trying to hang out any longer. I've been there really, like it's late for me. I need to be, even though sure everybody's days and nights got mixed up and stuff like that. Like it's still late. I need to be, you know, need to be getting home. My kid's already asleep in the back. Like I'm, you know, I know that I'm not talking to like the hardcore, hardened fucking cops from inner cities or whatever, but I figure that these are still, you know, we're in a weird enough place that I'm not going to be disturbing them with a fucking finger in a Ziploc bag. But they were really disturbed by it. They were really, really upset by it. They acted like they didn't know what to do about it or do with it. And then this Officer Boatwright dude starts accusing me of being a drug addict and starts accusing me of being crazy and asks me when the last time I smoked pot was. And then he starts to say that I have a warrant for my arrest and that I have all these warrants for my arrest, and starts to accuse me of being inebriated and drunk and all this other shit, even though he just saw me in front of this other fucking cop station where he told me to get the fuck back in my car and to drive over here and talk to these other fucking cops. So, like, I just left, you know what I mean? Like, I just had to sneak away from the abusive narcissists back in the ghetto who did this same thing that this cop was doing. And now I have to be standing here while this fucking narcissistic cop, makes fun of me in front of all these other cops and tells them about, like, you know, how stupid I am and shit. I've just survived COVID for the first time, which was just by the fucking grace of God. Like I was really fucking bad off. And then at the same time this COVID trash was happening, I had this boyfriend who was fucking feeding me, like he was, I guess, grinding up clonazepams or whatever that were prescribed to his son, and he was like poisoning me with them, and I'm not supposed to be like taking any of those kinds of prescription pills. They just completely disagree with me in all ways, but he kept like drugging me with that clonazepam shit, and it was really fucking me up, especially while I had COVID, because there was like certain drugs that you weren't supposed to take with COVID at all. And then my boyfriend at the time also was trying to give me like a head injury, and so he set up like my kid's like metal toy car type fucking thing on the floor in the bathroom, and like tried to like tried to like shove me down on the ground and tried to make it to where I'd like hit my head off of it and shit, but I like kind of figured out what he was doing and I blocked it. The cop ends up like searching my vehicle, um, like the kid's in the car asleep. They try to say that the kid's dead at first when the kid was just asleep, obviously. Like they wouldn't believe, they like acted like they couldn't accept what I was saying about the finger. They didn't say that it wasn't a finger. They just looked mortified about it. They wouldn't say anything about it. They wouldn't say anything about an obvious piece of human remains, but they looked in my car and saw my sleeping kid and told me that he was dead, which was fucking really retarded. And then they commenced searching all of my stuff, and in the process managed to steal my driver's license and the $80 that my grandmother just sent me, which was the only $80 that I had. Then they like asked me where my other kid was, and they like I was just like so kind of like in shock about everything that was going on. Like I couldn't remember what the fucking kid's mom's name was, and like she had just given me her insurance card, and I knew what the kid's mom's name was. You know what I mean? Me and my daughter talked about her. We said her name. Her name was Sarah. You know, and he kept asking me where my kid was, and I didn't honestly, I didn't want to fucking tell him where my kid was. But even if honestly, if I could have remembered her name through all of his abuse tactics, I probably would have. But literally, like her card was in there, and like they had me so shocked with what they were doing, just like taking my kid, dude. Like, so what he did was he starts searching my car, and then he searches my purse and stuff, and he finds his own gun keys that are attached to a life insurance policy keychain that says Paul Revere Life Insurance. And it has a serial code on it and everything. It's a little spinny keychain, but it's attached to apparently that cop's gun keys. And if it's not that cop's gun keys, then I don't understand why he made such a big deal about it. Anyways, it's somebody's fucking gun keys. They were like almost like these Allen wrench type key things for a Taurus gun. And they were attached to this life insurance keychain thing or whatever. Well, he started flipping his fucking shit about it, flipping the fuck out. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, wow, Tabitha and them told me that was the cop's gun keys, but I didn't really believe that they were his gun keys. You know what I mean? And like they would specifically talk to me about this cop, and then it would be set up that I would interact with him later and even have these keys that were supposedly his, and then he would freak out about these keys, asking me where I got them, and then he tried to go through my phone to figure out where I got the keys, but there wouldn't have been any information on my phone about those keys. Now, he might have found contacts on there who were associated with the keys, because I got those keys from Tabitha and from Jonathan. And Tabitha was actually like a prosty who might have been messing around with cops and could have been stealing from them. I'm not entirely sure how she ended up with Officer Boatwright's gun keys, but he tried to throw a fit and say that they weren't his gun keys, but he was like shaking like spastic over them. And then he said, he took my phone, he'd been trying to unlock it, and he said, he's like, your phone here, it has some kind of password. He was like, I need for you to give me the password to your phone. And I was like, what? He was like, I need to get into your phone. I need you to unlock your phone for me, and I need you to give me the password to your phone. And I was like, bruh, I'm not giving you my password to my phone, dude. Like, that's weird. Um, he said, if you don't give me the password to your phone right now, I'm gonna have CPS take your fucking kids. And I was like, bro, and I thought about it for a second, but I was like, bro, I can't just give you the password to my phone like that. That's some weird shit, dude. It's like, I guess you're gonna have to take my fucking kids. This sucks really fucking bad. But, and he did. He had a CPS worker show up, and she was like, can you tell me why you're here tonight and why we're taking your kid? And I said, I came here tonight to turn in a human finger and other evidence about how my children are potentially being abused behind my back, and that's why I'm going to jail tonight. The CPS worker was like really, really freaked out. Her name was Chelsea Strait. The CPS worker, she was like super freaked out about that, and she even looked at the finger. And I remember the first time that she looked at the finger in the bag, she was like, "Oh my god!" And she put it down. She couldn't even look at it, and you could feel like all these like intense vibes rolling off of her and stuff. She was really, really freaking out, and he was like telling her what he wanted her to do and shit. And he was like really, really harsh and temperamental, like telling her what he wanted her to do about the fucking situation. And she was like really like it seemed like she was under like a lot, but it was like a lot of pressure. Like he was asking her to do way too much, and that she acted like she wasn't sure she was going to be able to do what was expected of her or whatever, but she pulled it off anyways. And she ended up they ended up like opening my car up and taking my kid out of my car at like By the time that they were done doing all this fucking trash, it was probably like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't really even know what fucking time it was, but it was late. They managed to fucking ignore me until really late. And then they were able to use that in their report and say that I was just like up running around all hours of the night, all cracked out and shit. They tried to say that I brought them a chicken nugget, that it wasn't a real severed finger, that it was just a chicken nugget, and I was just too high to know the difference. I'm just too mentally ill to know the difference between a chicken nugget and a severed human finger. Yeah, and they wrote that up in their CPS report and everything, and they said that if I tried to defend myself, that Officer Boatwright was gonna, Officer Dope Dealer Boatwright, who needs my password, whose gun keys that Tabitha took from him during whatever affair or whatever, that so he was gonna show up to testify against me to make me lose my kid. And then they took me to jail on warrants that no one let me know that I had at any point. They did, or like they had them, but they just like turned them on or something like that. And they had me in there, and I basically, one of the things that I showed up for was to hopefully get some kind of like test done, because I just woke up in somebody else's clothes in my own apartment, and there was some fucking weird shit going on, like I said. And I went to the hospital in Clarksburg, and I went to the hospital in Morgantown right as soon as I got out of the jail. They wouldn't check me in jail. They wouldn't check me in either of those hospitals. It was super fucked up. And I even saw Officer Boatwright and Deputy Sayer, that they followed me both to Clarksburg and Morgantown, and they blocked the nurses being able to give me a great test at either place. And they also blocked me being tested while I was in jail in the Tiger Valley Regional Jail. And while I was in there, they came in with this giant metallic canister, and they sprayed all kinds of like, I'm assuming that it was pesticide, or some kind of sanitation. I'm assuming that it was pesticide, and they just completely filled the room with it and shut the door. And whatever it was made me pass out, and they kept just like waking me up and asking me if I was addicted to anything and asking me all these questions and stuff like that. It was super messed up. And that's whenever, through the midst of all that, I ended up seeing Charity in there, and I was able to like run over to Charity's cell and talk to her for a second and tell her that like I woke up, and I was like that all this different stuff had happened, and that there was pictures of me on my phone that I didn't take. And she said that the same thing happened to Cheyenne and to other people. And then whenever I tried to talk to Cheyenne about it, Cheyenne did say that the same thing had happened. And she also said that she had been having trouble with Officer Boatwright. And between all of the women that I talked to around Elkins and everywhere else, they said that lots of women and lots of people had had trouble with Officer Boatwright. He said that they said that he does this thing where where he puts handcuffs on people really tight, and they call that the Boatwright roll. That I guess he puts. Then this is kind of what he did to me, but he didn't put them on as tight on me as apparently he's done on other people, because they have like scars around their wrists and stuff. But he'll put the handcuffs on them really, really tight, and then he turned on "Smoke Two Joints" by Sublime really loud whenever I was in the car, and he was driving around all crazy and stuff. And honestly, I wasn't sure I was actually going to make it to the jailhouse. Like, I thought that he was actually going to like pull over off to the side of the road and like try to interrogate me or torture me or something like that. Like, that was actually one of the times that I wondered if I was really going to die. Was whenever Officer Boatwright was mad at me, and he was taking me, like, after having my kid taken and everything, like, which I didn't tell the full story thereof or whatever, but eventually I will. But I ended up going to the jail. I didn't even know how long I was there, because I slept through so much of it, and I swear it was because of shit that they were doing there, and they kept like turning the TV up as loud as possible so that we couldn't hear what was happening to the other inmates. And that's just how it was all the time. It was just this like TV blaring fucking nonstop, and you'd just be like in and out of fucking consciousness, and you'd wake up and there'd be like gloves on the floor, and you wouldn't know who had been in there with you while you were passed out. And like they didn't give us silverware or anything. There was no soap to wash my hands. Like I am even though I told them that I thought something that had happened to me, like they didn't let me take a shower for the first like however many days I was in there or change my clothes. Like I was actually in the clothes that I woke up in that was some dude's clothes, and I didn't even fucking know whose clothes they were and shit, which was part of the reason why I fucking went to the police, you know? And like no one could address any of that. No one gave a single fuck about any of that fucking shit. Like even whenever Officer Boatwright went to arrest me, like I was covered in black bruises, like all over, and you could. I almost felt him like stop for a second and be like, "What the fuck?" But arrest me anyways. Yeah, and that was the first time that they took my kids. And while I was in jail, they had Chelsea Straight call me, and she was completely fucked up. She was like on pills, or she was drunk, or something like that, and she was so fucking trashed that the guards who were listening started like knocking on the fucking door, knocking on the window, and telling her they were telling me to like hang up the phone and stuff like that, because here she was like trying to tell me that she was recording our conversation and shit, but there was obviously shit was fucked up. And I told her, I was like, I think I'm gonna have to get off the phone because these guys are knocking on the window like telling me to get off the phone and shit. And she was like let's just go on, you know what I mean? It was really bad. But she ended up sitting on the phone with me until she felt like she had enough information to just like never give me my fucking kid back ever again. Which all that it took was me saying that I admitting to smoking pot, and then she wrote this whole thing up saying that that they did have to take my kid away because I thought that a severed finger was a chicken wing, and that it was also because I smoked pot. And they had me like they wrote up this whole thing saying that they and this would take months, but eventually they would write up this thing saying that they took my kid because I smoked pot, and that they had me sign that and shit like that, and they didn't say anything about the severed finger incident like ever again. So there's just a little bit of that story.